The CBS 2 investigators discovered that over 3 decades, Clark swindled.
They had the yellow vests on, and they had a fistful of cash.
My Kia Optima was stolen twice in one day.
We'd like to make everybody aware of the scam.
We lost almost $50,000.
The largest class action lawsuits this nation's ever seen.
They know how to hit you without leaving marks.
Victims that are never going to experience justice.
Do you think they'll ever solve this crime?
I hope so, before I die.
A culture that has allowed this system to cover up abuse.
Thank you for joining us. The CBS 2 Investigators special, In Your Corner and On Your Corner. I'm Brad Edwards. Changing laws and changing lives. That's our marching orders, and that's what we do. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll share some of our highlights of the year, the biggest stories of 2022, and how your voices and our microphones held the powerful accountable and affected change. That's where we begin. Statewide systemic failures. The CBS 2 investigators made unprecedented discoveries about child abuse. Children often in trouble and in need, and then failed by their caretakers and the state, the Department of Children and Family Services. Our Dave Savini now with the culmination of 3 years of work. That work now leading to new legislation and giving voice to those who never had it until now.
First thing, I noticed you've had a lot of hairdos over the years.
Yeah, I know.
On the surface, Kaylin Brown seems happy.
I cut my hair, grew it back, cut it again.
I think the last time I saw you, it was purple.
Yeah. Yeah.
A loving mother of 2 kids.
Count and breathe.
1, 2, 3.
Now hopes her darkest days are behind her.
No child should go through that. That's why I keep my kids close to me.
And you were 5.
Yeah.
Sexually assaulted when she was just 5, the same age as Kayla Rose, her oldest daughter.
It's not common for kids to catch an STD as young as I did, but that's the first time I caught my STD when I was 5.
Kaylin remembers at least 17 different foster homes and facilities and years of physical, mental, and sexual abuse in a child welfare system that was supposed to protect her.
I was abused my whole entire life.
She was still in the system when we first met her 3 years ago.
Nobody really wanted me.
This is a gathering of 14 now adults.
I was in 30 within a year.
30 different homes.
Yes.
Sharing stories of horror as children.
And how old were you when you went into the system?
3.
14 survivors no longer silenced by the fear of retribution and abuse.
How young were you when you were first abused?
Probably 12.
I've been neglected.
All of them placed in foster care in the custody of DCFS, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services.
I've been physically, sexually, mentally abused.
The agency's failure leaving each their own painful path of recovery.
I was physically and emotionally abused. I was beaten.
And when it comes to Kaylin, she's still trying to pull through the wreckage.
And you're homeless now, living in a shelter. And how old again are you?
I'm 19.
Another time that haunts her as a child is when 2 adult males from one of her foster families stole the Girl Scout cookie money she raised.
All of it. I had over $600 that I've sold for cookies.
And you were hoping to get a prize?
Yes.
What could you have won?
It was basically this big bicycle at the time.
After accusing the men, she says, to teach her a lesson, she was beaten and assaulted again.
I would say I was raped at least 3 to 4 times.
She says there were trips to the hospital, rape kits, and cries for help at school, but DCFS left her in abusive homes.
How many of you suffered abuse in foster homes?
Perhaps more twisted, these survivors say when they reported abuse, they were ignored. And that disturbing proof may be found here, inside this DCFS database. After a long battle, the CBS 2 investigators obtained abuse records from 2016 to 2021. Every child has an 8-digit ID number. Line by line, row after row, cries for help. And our meticulous analysis uncovers a deeply troubling pattern. When a DCFS child is allegedly abused, 9 out of 10 times, it is unfounded.
The department has a a history of not believing the kids.
James McIntyre says his allegations also were not believed. He still suffers from the trauma.
I was sexually abused. I was neglected. I was starved.
He now helps DCFS survivors and heads the Foster Care Alumni Association of Illinois, which includes these 14.
Foster kids make the best victims.
The data the CBS 2 investigators obtained contains more than 6,000 abuse and neglect allegations made against 3,200 foster parents. And while nearly 90% of all abuse and neglect allegations were deemed unfounded, sexual offense allegations like sexual abuse risk, molestation, penetration, and exploitation are also unfounded by DCFS 88% of the time.
We respond to kids who've been abused.
Mark Smith has been director of DCFS since 2019.
I think that depending on the circumstance, we can all get better at the way we respond to the needs of all of our children and families.
The most common form of abuse in the DCFS data involves physical harm and neglect allegations like bone fractures, head injuries, burns, and torture. In a staggering number of these incidents, 91% unfounded by DCFS investigators.
Did any of your abusers get convicted?
No. Mine went on to actually work with children. If you're going to take, youth from their parents, you need to protect them.
Mallory Stout says she was placed into DCFS protective care when she was only 4, but once inside the system, the abuse just continued.
There's no reason why we should be receiving more abuse within the system than we receive within our own home.
It is a child protective service, but yet these kids don't feel protected.
Illinois State Representative Lakeisha Collins knows about foster care abuse. She grew up in the DCFS system, but what she didn't know was just how overwhelmingly often Illinois foster care parents are cleared of abuse and neglect allegations.
It's really mind-boggling for me.
Did you have any idea that the numbers were as big as we found?
No, I did not, and it's disheartening.
Collins, who's been trying to reform the agency, says despite repeated requests, DCFS has stonewalled her from getting the kind of crucial data the CBS 2 investigators have now uncovered. In the foster care data DCFS did turn over, we found cries for help are climbing. In 2016, 961 claims. In 2021, that number shot up to 1,205, a 25% increase for complaints of abuse and neglect.
So you're saying CBS Chicago has this data?
You have the data, and I don't, and I'm the lawmaker.
And a light bulb's going off.
It is, because what else are we not getting?
Did you see yourself in that group of 14?
Yes. Those former youth in care, they were not lying. They were telling the truth. How many more kids got to die? How many more have to get raped or harmed in the current operations?
Collins says she was a teenager when a foster parent physically assaulted her.
You were beaten up while you were in foster care.
She beat me up, right? In front of other kids in the house.
She says even her allegation of abuse in foster care was never investigated.
It was like it never happened.
And nobody ever reported it to police?
No. Police were not notified. The caseworker never followed up with me. That is the culture of this system. And that is why what you all are doing is so important.
In this entire group, nobody's abuser was ever charged with a crime.
I can't speak to if any individual case was brought to the police or not, but I will say this. Depending on the circumstance, depending on the perpetrator, cases are brought to the police from the DCFS perspective.
When CBS requested the records of how many of those 6,000 allegations DCFS referred to police, DCFS told us they couldn't turn that over because they don't have it. They don't keep track.
The public looks at it as if you're being, you're deceiving the public.
You want to pass a law that will require DCFS to track these cases?
Yes. The tracking part is important because how then can you see the red flags?
Kaylin Brown says she faced backlash as a child whenever she tried to report abuse, and police were never notified.
My caseworker didn't really care.
Do you feel like there's hope?
There is, baby. Don't ever lose hope. That's all you got most of the time.
Collins is already working on legislation to require DCFS make its abuse and neglect data public, including the tracking of which cases are referred to police. We are continuing our battle with DCFS to get more records, and we will be staying on the case. Dave Savini, CBS 2 Investigators.
Still ahead, we keep the focus on kids and scammers targeting them. CBS 2's Dorothy Tucker shows us how fraudsters are keeping youngsters hungry. First, it was the unemployed, millions of victims of identity thieves. Now, the scammers have a new target, families in need of food. Those who depend on federally funded food programs are finding their link cards empty. CBS 2 investigator Dorothy Tucker discovers loopholes in a system that leaves children hungry.
I had no idea that I was going to have to be struggling to try to put food on the table.
After 13 years of marriage, Ana Salgado got divorced.
He decided to just walk out. I was like $7,000 in debt with 4 kids.
So she needed help and signed up for SNAP, a federal food program that pays for groceries. The money is loaded on her link card, the balance $820.
I need it. Yes, I definitely do need it.
But in June, the one thing she needed, the main source of food for her children, suddenly disappeared. She was shopping at Costco. She'd gotten about $200 worth of groceries.
As I was about getting ready to pay, the guy's like, nope, there's nothing in here. It says $0. I was just overwhelmed and I didn't know what to do.
Someone has stolen Salgado's identity and cleaned out her link card.
We're investigating a new kind of unemployment fraud.
We saw the same thing happen to the unemployed during the pandemic.
The state did nothing to stop unemployment fraud.
ID thieves stole billions of dollars from millions of Americans who lost their jobs.
It's okay.
We now know the unemployed weren't the only targets. The heartless hackers are taking food out of the mouths of children.
It's very hurtful. It's extremely hurtful.
Just how many families like Salgado's are hurting in Illinois? That's a question for the state agency that distributes the benefits. So the CBS 2 investigators sent a public records request seeking the number of SNAP fraud complaints. Request denied. Exempt from release. Instead, we got a link to a 2020 investigations report.
Guess what? 56 pages. We read them all. It's mostly about merchants or recipients defrauding the government, but no report, not one, on families being victimized by scammers.
Why does that matter? Just ask Eva Velasquez, CEO of the ID Theft Resource Center, a nonprofit that helps fraud victims.
Identity crimes have these tentacles, so it doesn't just impact that one individual.
When they lose, you lose.
If that identity crime is being perpetrated by a fraud ring, then that's money that's leaving the U.S. economy, and it is gone.
All the transactions are seconds apart.
Remember, in Salgado's case, the fraudster stole everything on her card. And when she went to the DHS office, assuming the state would replace the money, she met this man.
I was one caseworker out of several caseworkers.
An insider who didn't want to be identified, but he gave us details the agency wouldn't.
In my office, whenever the fraud would happen, I would see maybe 5 to 10 victims within that day.
There were many days, he says, when he'd have to explain to people like Salgado that she could get a new link card, but that $820, gone.
Those funds that were taken out, that were stolen from them, are not going to be given back.
It's a fact. The feds don't replace stolen SNAP benefits. They argue there's no way to prove the hacker didn't have permission to use the card.
It's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating.
One of the biggest cheerleaders willing to fight to get the government to replace stolen benefits is Illinois Representative Sonia Harper. You see, she feels their pain.
I've been on SNAP before.
Harper was a law student and a new mom with few options.
I just found the experience, just standing in line for food stamps alone, to be very hard and challenging and disheartening. To know that there's not a process for when your benefits are stolen, that's a pretty hard thing to deal with.
Harper is looking at legislation that will help fraud victims. But Salgado?
But they don't see the struggles that we have to
she still feels the loss.
Put ourselves through and our kids so they can have some food on the table. It's just so overwhelming.
Dorothy Tucker, CBS 2 Investigators.
And next, a successful business owner gets swindled out of hundreds of thousands of dollars by a company claiming to be from Chicago. Our Dana Kozlov gets down to the bottom of a timeshare twist. Coming up. It sounded too good to be true. An offer from a company claiming to be from Chicago and a hefty profit promise for his timeshare. But CBS 2 political investigator Dana Kozlov found an elaborate scam and a victim who lost a lot.
Timeshares can quickly go from heaven to headache. So when someone with a purported Chicago-based company called Intercontinental Realty called the owner of a Cancun, Mexico timeshare, saying he could sell it for more than $1 million, the owner was interested, but skeptical.
At the time, it sounds like it's a scam. It sounds like there's something fishy here. So you need to know up front that I'm suspicious.
But that employee started providing the owner, who does not want to be identified, with documents and guarantees that finally convinced him to go ahead with the deal.
Next thing you know, we get a phone call that in order to process this thing, we need to pay a fee.
The owner says he got more elaborate emails and documentations, but the requests for more money kept coming until he found himself out $300,000.
Foolishly. I mean, I have to tell you, Dana, that, greed drove this thing. I kept, the little voice in the back of my head kept saying, there's just something not right here, but that $1 million kept waving at me.
Since the company's website states it's located at 7 West Madison in the Loop, the owner hired Chicago private investigator Joe McGreal to do some digging.
Immediately, within the first hour, I knew it was a scam.
McGreal began talking with Intercontinental Realty's supposed employees.
So I offered to meet with them. We set up 3 different meetings. They never showed.
So McGreal went to 7 West Madison, the address listed on Intercontinental Realty's website.
There are no real estate agents there. There's no office there.
I checked it out too. Hi there. Question for you. And found 7 West Madison is a dorm for the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I confirmed with an SAIC spokesperson no tenant or business called Intercontinental Realty is located there. So we tried calling the number on the website.
Hi, you've reached the voicemail of Intercontinental Realty.
No one returned our calls, but it doesn't end there.
Everything comes back to Mexico.
McGreal took the documents given to the owner to the Mexican consulate. He says consulate officials confirmed they were forged.
It looks legitimate, and it's difficult for the victims to determine that it's fake.
A very, very elaborate scam.
And he's not the only victim. 7 other complaints have been filed with the Illinois Attorney General about Intercontinental Realty. Some of those victims out thousands and thousands of dollars too.
Yeah, we'd like to make everybody aware of the scam.
But McGreal and that scammed timeshare owner believe there are many more victims out there, and they hope that they will come forward to help McGreal catch the scam artists. McGreal also says that Mexican authorities are now investigating, but no one from the Mexican consulate returned any of my emails or my phone calls. In Chicago, Dana Kozlov, CBS 2 News.
Car thefts are up across the city, and if you own a couple specific makes, you're really a target. Next, shocking stats and what you can do if you've been a victim. Imagine wondering pretty much all day long whether or not your car has been stolen. Car thefts in Chicago year over year are way up. Take a look. You can see the numbers right there, but that's a small beans increase compared to, for example, Kias. Kia car thefts are up nearly 1,000%. CBS 2 investigators have been on top of this trend for months. I've got to look at some new numbers and new calls to do something.
That's a better picture.
Oh, wow.
It's been a nightmare. I don't feel safe in the car. They won't let me trade it.
Miss McKinney lost her job because her car was stolen. And her mom has Alzheimer's, and her husband is disabled.
being without a car, and you have handicapped peoples, and you also have peoples that depend on you, it messes your life up. One of my friends, his car was stolen twice.
Heard that.
They was pulling off in my car.
And this is not her aforementioned friend.
My Kia Optima, 2019 Kia Optima, was stolen twice in one day.
In a day. On that day, CPD found it within hours, and
around 3 p.m. that same day, the owner of the shop called me and said that my car had just been stolen again from in front of his shop.
I'm an attorney representing a class of plaintiffs against Hyundai and Kia.
he's a California-based attorney. That claim grows precipitously.
We expect this to be one of the largest class action lawsuits this nation's ever seen.
What is the demographic makeup of your class?
Lower to middle class individuals, minorities, they make up probably 80 to 85% of the plaintiffs of our class.
Our research bears out those demographics. Here's Chicago, in blue. That's the universe of non-Hyundai Kia cars stolen in 2022. And then add in the Hyundai Kia cars, now in the red. Majority South and West Side. And while Kias and Hyundais make up a mere 7% of the city's cars, they are 38% of the city's car thefts.
Government needs to get involved. This has become a public nuisance.
Why hasn't government reacted? The data smacks you in the face. We analyzed it. The stolen car spike in Chicago. Watch. Hyundai and Kias in June, 5 were taken a day on average. In July, more than triple that, 17 a day. September, 39 a day. November, 65 stolen a day on average. And how about this for the bar graph, folks? Starts January 2022 to present. Watch the reds, the Kias and Hyundais. And finishing first is not a win.
We see no sign of it letting up.
It's because the cars in question lack an engine immobilizer. Now, we're not going to show you how easy it is to nick a Kia, but Google will. Mr. Fleet says the bottom line is the bottom line.
So really, this is about Hyundai and Kia putting profits over public safety.
I really hope that I could trade the vehicle in.
But she can't.
Because I don't feel safe in it. And I get tired of looking out the window, making sure it's there.
You look out the window just to make sure your car's not stolen?
Yeah.
Miss McKinney and many others stuck looking out the window.
We reached out to the mayor's office and there was no comment. CPD also has not commented on an action plan. And that's just a snapshot of what the CBS investigators have been working on, and we will continue to. For the latest on all of our stories, check our website, cbschicago.com. I'm Brad Edwards. For all of us here at CBS 2 Chicago, thank you for joining us. And here's how we're here for you. Reach out. We're always listening.